For 15 centuries, fishermen spoke in hushed tones about carved stones rising from the mud each time the Sea of Galilee receded. Proof, they insisted, that something lost slept beneath those waters. Mainstream scholars scoffed until new excavation data tipped the entire quest for Bethsaida's location on its head. If the shoreline legends are true, and the mosaic inscription inside this buried basilica really holds a command from Jesus never before seen in Scripture, the meaning of missing may be far greater than anyone imagined. So why did archaeologists risk their careers to chase what others called a myth? And what did they actually find beneath the mud? On the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, stories passed from father to son carried a stubborn certainty. Each time the lake's level dropped, sometimes by as much as 5 meters in the harshest droughts, fishermen claimed to spot the tops of carved stones jutting through the mud. These weren't just idle tales of men waiting for the catch to bite. Diaries from early European travelers, dating back to the 18th and 19th centuries, recorded the same phenomenon: strange, squared stones surfacing after long, dry seasons, only to disappear again with the rains. Local elders spoke of a massive structure hidden beneath the silt, a place where nets snagged on something far older than any living memory. For centuries, these stories were dismissed as folklore, colorful but unreliable. But as hydrologists began charting the lake's erratic rhythms, the pattern of exposed ruins matched up with the oral accounts. The shoreline here swings wildly, shaped by drought, flood, and the Jordan's unpredictable flow. Each extreme low revealed a little more, tempting outsiders to wonder if the legends contained a kernel of truth. Professor Mordecai Aviam, an archaeologist with a reputation for listening as much as digging, took the fisherman's story seriously. He spent hours in lakeside cafes, notebook open, recording details from men who had spent lifetimes on these waters. Aviam later explained, "The locals always insisted something enormous was buried here, not just a wall or a pier, but a whole building." He cross-referenced their reports with old travel diaries and Byzantine pilgrimage records, tracing the same rumors back more than 1,000 years. When it came time to choose a site for excavation, the decision wasn't made by satellite data or remote sensing alone. It was the weight of repeated testimony, generation after generation, describing the same stones in the same place, that tipped the balance. In this way, folk memory became the first tool in the archaeologist's kit, setting the stage for an investigation that would test the boundaries between legend and evidence. Archaeologists faced a crossroads that would define the entire investigation. The question was simple, but the consequences were enormous. Where exactly was biblical Bethsaida? The answer would determine whether years of work would lead to a breakthrough or a dead end. Two rival sites stood at the center of the debate. Et Tel, a rocky hilltop 2 kilometers inland, had been excavated for over 30 years. Its defenders pointed to Iron Age ramparts and the scale of ancient city walls. Dr. Rami Arav, Et Tel's most vocal advocate, argued that only a fortified settlement could match Bethsaida's historical weight. Yet the site's distance from the lake raised doubts. No fisherman would drag his catch so far uphill, and the absence of first-century houses left a gap that couldn't be ignored. El Araj, on the other hand, lay directly on the muddy shoreline. Recent cores drilled here revealed layers of Roman-era silt and evidence of a fishing village active in the 1st century. Pottery fragments, lead net weights, and coins from the time of Jesus surfaced just beneath the topsoil. In 2021, ground-penetrating radar traced a buried roadway leading straight to the water's edge, matching gospel descriptions of a lakeside town. Critics dismissed El Araj as too small, claiming its Byzantine ruins were built over nothing more than a swamp. But the shoreline's constant flooding and the thick, protective mud hinted at secrets waiting below. The decision divided scholars and risked reputations. Choosing the wrong site could waste entire seasons and academic careers. For Aviam and his team, the convergence of local stories, ancient texts, and hard data tipped the scales. They committed to El Araj, staking everything on the belief that the shoreline mud concealed the truth. With this choice, the first trench was cut, and the search for Bethsaida's lost heart began. Heat pressed down on the excavation site like a physical weight, with midday temperatures climbing past 38 degrees Celsius and humidity turning every breath into effort. The air vibrated with the constant growl of pumps, each one fighting to keep the trenches from filling with lake water that seeped up through the mud. In field diaries, the numbers told their own story. Nearly 300 cubic meters of water hauled out daily, yet the ground stayed stubbornly slick. Boots lost traction, shovels pulled up nothing but wet silt, and after weeks of labor, the only finds were a handful of Roman pottery shards and the occasional lead net weight. Moral, tracked in the corner of a battered notebook, dropped lower with each passing day. Eli, one of the younger volunteers, moved with a dogged persistence that stood out even as the team's energy flagged. On the 23rd day, his trowel struck something unyielding, a sharp, metallic clang that echoed through the trench. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Ben David, the site supervisor, called for everyone to stop. The sound was unmistakable. Not pottery, not loose stone, but a cut edge. Eli scraped away more mud, revealing the corner of a wall, its angle too precise to be natural. The team pressed in, hands trembling with the sudden rush of hope. Ben David's face shifted from exhaustion to disbelief as more of the stonework came into view, layer upon layer, each one fitting perfectly atop the next. The ground that had seemed so empty now offered up the first real sign of something monumental. For the first time that season, the air in the trench felt lighter, as if the site itself had been holding its breath. The clang had broken the spell of disappointment, and with it, the possibility of uncovering something lost for centuries became real. Stone by stone, the full extent of the buried structure came into focus. What began as a single wall soon revealed itself to be the foundation of a basilica, stretching nearly 90 feet in length and over 50 feet across. The thick, squared blocks formed a perimeter that dwarfed any common dwelling, with the eastern end curving into a broad apse, its radius nearly matching those of the grandest Byzantine churches in the region. Ben David, standing at the edge of the trench, pointed out the alignment of the apse, noting how it faced directly toward Jerusalem, a detail favored by sacred builders of the era. Layers of mud peeled away to expose a mosaic floor, its colors shockingly vivid after 15 centuries in darkness. Reds and blues still glimmered in geometric patterns, interlocked with bands of gold and onyx. The tesserae, tiny cubes of stone and glass, were set so tightly that even after all this time, few had shifted. The design swept outward from the apse in concentric circles, drawing the eye to the center of the sanctuary, as if inviting worshippers to step into a sacred story. Artifacts began to surface between the mosaic's edges and the base of the walls. Bronze coins, pressed with the faces of long-dead emperors, clustered in the soil near the altar's former base. Ben David explained that such finds helped date the construction. Several coins bore the image of Emperor Heraclius, placing the basilica's completion in the early 7th century. Scattered among the coins were fragments of colored glass, likely remnants of oil lamps that once flickered during nighttime vigils. A narrow lead conduit traced a straight line beneath the floor, channeling rainwater away from the sacred space. Its precision suggested careful planning, not the improvisation of a rural chapel. Every feature, the thickness of the walls, the orientation of the apse, the artistry of the mosaic, spoke of a community determined to honor a place of deep memory. The sheer scale and craftsmanship left little doubt. This was no fisherman's hut, but a monument built to last, standing as silent witness to centuries of devotion. Stavros, a specialist in ancient Greek inscriptions, arrived at the site with a battered leather case and a reputation for precision. The mosaic's central medallion, just under 40 centimeters across, had been freed from centuries of mud by careful conservation. Stavros began his work not with a brush, but with a portable reflectography scanner. The team set the device to 950 nanometers, the sweet spot for reading faded pigments and shallow incisions without harming the surface. As the scanner swept the medallion, high-resolution images revealed every nuance, the formal dedication around the outer ring, the subtle differences in tesserae, and the crispness of each Greek character. Paleographic analysis followed. Stavros compared the letter shapes and ligatures to known Byzantine examples. The grammar was unmistakably Koine. But the syntax, especially in the phrase referring to Peter as chief and commander of the heavenly apostles, was rare outside formal church dedications. The epigraphic style, with its tall, tightly grouped letters and distinctive open-tailed rows, matched other 7th century inscriptions from Crete and Asia Minor. No evidence of modern tampering appeared. The imaging resolution allowed Stavros to identify even the faintest tool marks beneath the mosaic surface, confirming the inscription was original to the floor and not a later addition. Each scan, each line of Greek, narrowed the gap between legend and artifact. The process left little room for doubt. What the team had uncovered was not only authentic, but also a direct product of the era when the church above had first been built. Interpretation of the mosaic inscription quickly ignited debate among scholars and clergy. The phrase describing Peter as chief and commander of the heavenly apostles landed at the heart of a centuries-old dispute. For the Catholic tradition, this language echoes the doctrine of Petrine primacy, the idea that Peter held unique authority as the first pope. The inscription's use of the Greek term for key bearer draws a direct line to the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus says, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." In this reading, the keys represent not just spiritual authority, but a mandate for leadership that sets Peter apart from the other apostles. Protestant theologians, however, read the same words differently. They argue the title key bearer reflects a role of service rather than supremacy, pointing out that the New Testament often shows Peter acting alongside the other apostles, not above them. For these interpreters, the inscription is a product of later embellishment, shaped by the political needs of the Byzantine Church rather than the earliest Christian communities. They note that the phrase chief and commander does not appear in any canonical gospel, suggesting it was added to reinforce a developing hierarchy. Dr. Rebecca Hale, a professor known for her critical approach to early Christian texts, adds another layer to the controversy. She points out that the language of the inscription fits a pattern seen in other Byzantine dedications, formal, honorific, and sometimes exaggerated. In her view, the mosaic reflects the beliefs of its own era more than it preserves an original teaching of Jesus. For skeptics like Hale, the find is a fascinating window into how doctrine evolved, but it cannot settle the question of Peter's true role. In the end, the inscription becomes a battleground for rival interpretations, raising questions that reach far beyond the muddy shores of Galilee. Ancient thinkers saw the world as a web of hidden connections, where physical places could echo the patterns of the divine. In the writings of early Christian mystics and fringe philosophers, Galilee's shoreline was more than a backdrop for miracles. It was a place where the boundary between earth and heaven thinned. Hermetic texts from Alexandria spoke of the principle as above, so below, suggesting that sacred sites on earth might serve as anchors for cosmic order. The idea wasn't limited to outsiders. Origen, a 3rd century Christian teacher, warned that certain places carried spiritual weight because they had witnessed acts of power, blessings or curses that lingered long after the crowds had gone. Gnostic writings, preserved only in fragments, described guardians and gatekeepers tasked with watching over the thresholds between light and matter. These guardians weren't just metaphors. In some traditions, they were believed to defend holy ground from forces seeking to unravel it. Early church leaders, wary of such speculation, worked to distance themselves from these mystical ideas, branding them as heresy. Still, the echoes persisted. Pilgrims whispered that some locations, Bethsaida among them, were chosen as much for their spiritual resonance as for their history. The mosaic floor at El Araj, set precisely atop the remains of a 1st century house, fits this ancient pattern. Whether by design or by memory, the builders seemed to believe they were preserving more than stone and mortar. The act of anchoring a church over a fisherman's dwelling hints at a worldview where geography itself could become a vessel for the sacred, a node in the circuitry connecting heaven and earth. Interest in the discoveries at El Araj has not been limited to academic circles. In the months following the wildfire that revealed new Roman structures beneath the shoreline, media coverage surged worldwide. Headlines speculated about the true location of Bethsaida and the possibility of uncovering direct links to the apostles. Social media platforms tracked a sharp rise in posts and shares about the site, with videos from the dig drawing hundreds of thousands of views. News outlets in Israel and abroad highlighted the renewed debate, while local tourism boards began planning for an expected influx of visitors once excavation resumes. The Israel Antiquities Authority responded by awarding a significant new grant for the 2025 season. The funding aims to support conservation of the mosaics, expand the area under investigation, and ensure that artifacts are preserved for future study. For Professor Aviam and his colleagues, the grant represents more than just financial support. It's a mandate to keep searching for answers that have eluded generations. Aviam reflected, "Each layer we uncover brings us closer to the reality behind the stories. We owe it to history and to those who have kept these memories alive to keep asking questions." Archaeologists estimate that a substantial portion of early Christian writings, possibly as much as 5%, have been lost to time, either through decay, destruction, or deliberate omission. Every new discovery at El Araj raises hope that some of these gaps might yet be filled. Public interest in the project has grown by over 200% compared to previous years, according to digital analytics firms tracking online engagement. The momentum has created a sense of urgency. With each season, the window to recover ancient evidence narrows. The future of biblical archaeology now depends not just on what remains buried, but on the choices made today to uncover and protect it. Today, the mosaic uncovered at El Araj reminds us that the boundaries of Scripture are not as fixed as many believe. As new discoveries surface, old certainties face fresh questions. The past isn't finished speaking, and what we accept as complete truth may still be missing vital chapters. The search for understanding continues, both in ancient mud and in modern minds. What would you ask if you could unearth one lost line?